She was dragged to town like cattle, just like her mother had been. But when the rancher saw her eyes, eyes that held too much sorrow for a child, he didn't see a sail. He saw a daughter. The whip cracked once, not to strike but to silence. The girl flinched anyway. Dirt caked her bare feet, and her dress, if it could still be called that, hung in shreds from her tiny frame. 12 years old, but she looked younger, smaller, thinner. Her name was Clara, though no one had called her that in months. To the man gripping her wrist and dragging her through the dust-choked street, she was the girl, the brat, the leftover. She didn't cry anymore. She had used up all her tears the day they came for her mama. Now she just stared. It was market day in Bellstone, and the crowd was thick near the pens. Folks bartered for feed, traded horses, and looked away when the man yanked Clara toward the raised platform outside the saloon. Not because they didn't care, but because they knew better. Children were trouble, mouths to feed, bad luck to take in, and worse luck to ask questions about. The man, Harlan Coyle, a trader known more for whiskey breath than mercy, shoved Clara toward the wooden steps. She stumbled but didn't fall. She wouldn't give him that. He grinned, a flash of yellow teeth under a greasy mustache. "Last one of the day," he called out. "Strong for her size, quiet, doesn't ask questions." Clara's hands balled into fists. She wasn't strong. She wasn't quiet. She was just numb. And she remembered. She remembered the last time someone stood where she stood now. Her mother, Lita, tall and trembling, holding her daughter's hand until it was pried away. Just a job, they'd said. Just a housekeeper for the West. Lita never came back. And now Clara stood where her mama once did, knees locked, throat burning. The sun pressed down hot and unrelenting. No one spoke. No one stepped forward. Harlan muttered something under his breath and pushed Clara to the edge of the platform. "She'll work," he shouted. "Can clean, can cook, ain't sick." Still silence. Until boots echoed across the ground. Slow, deliberate. Clara didn't lift her head. She was too used to disappointment, too used to hearing men say, "Too skinny," or "Don't want no orphans," or worse. But this time the silence dragged on too long. The boot stopped just beneath her. She looked up and saw him. The man was tall, not just in height but in presence. Broad shoulders, worn coat, dust-covered hat pulled low over eyes that watched her like a storm watches dry land. His name was Thatcher Reed, though Clara wouldn't know it until later. And Thatcher didn't look at Harlan. He didn't look at the platform. He looked at Clara. And frowned. "What's her name?" he asked, voice quiet but cutting. "Doesn't matter," Harlan said, trying to laugh. "She don't talk, you want her or not." Thatcher's eyes narrowed. Clara held his gaze for a breath, then another. Something in her stomach twisted. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was something else. Like standing near a fire that hadn't yet burned you. "How much?" Thatcher asked. Harlan named a price. Too high for a child. A price meant to scare off buyers who might ask too many questions. Thatcher didn't blink. He reached into his coat, pulled out a pouch, and dropped it without looking. "Come on," he said. Clara didn't move. "Come on, girl," Harlan hissed, reaching to shove her forward. Thatcher stepped between them, so fast the dust didn't have time to settle. "She walks on her own," he said, "or the deal's off." Clara stared. No one had ever spoken like that for her, not even Mama, not after they'd taken her. Her legs moved before her mind caught up. She stepped off the platform and landed beside him, unsteady but upright. "Your name?" he asked. Her lips parted. She hadn't said it aloud in so long. "Clara," she whispered. He nodded. And then they walked. No more words, no questions, just the sound of boots and bare feet on dirt as the crowd went back to pretending nothing happened. Hours passed before either of them spoke again. Thatcher's horse waited at the edge of town, already saddled, another bundled bag tied behind it. He helped Clara up, not like a child, but like someone he expected to hold on. She did. They rode west, through low hills and broken trees, until the sun dropped behind the horizon and the stars opened like wounds in the sky. Thatcher finally stopped near a stream, dismounted, and helped Clara down. He didn't ask if she was hungry. He just handed her a strip of jerky and a piece of bread, then started a fire with practiced hands. She sat on a log and stared at the flames. He sat beside her but kept his distance. "You from Bellstone?" he asked. "No," Clara said. He nodded. "Parents?" Clara stared at the fire. "My mama was sold," she said. "Said it was work, she never came back." Thatcher didn't speak. He just looked at the fire and added another stick. "She had a ribbon," Clara whispered. "Red said it meant freedom, said she'd give it to me when I was old enough. I ain't seen it since they took her." The wind shifted. "You still got family." Clara shook her head. "You do now," he said, standing. "We ride at dawn." She blinked. "What?" Thatcher met her eyes. "I don't buy children," he said. "I free them." And with that he walked toward the horse, leaving Clara alone by the fire, clutching the bread tighter than before. That night she didn't sleep much, not because of fear, but because her heart wouldn't stop racing. Because for the first time since her mother vanished, someone had spoken to her like she was real, like she mattered. And somewhere deep inside, a tiny part of Clara began to believe. Morning came with frost on the grass and steam rising from the stream like breath from the earth itself. Clara woke to the faint smell of coffee and the sound of hoofbeats, not wild or hurried, just the steady rhythm of a man moving with purpose. She sat up slowly, blanket tangled around her small limbs, the fire now just a whisper of smoke and dying embers. Across the clearing, Thatcher stood by his horse, checking the saddlebags, his back to her. For a moment Clara didn't move. The memory of yesterday still sat thick in her bones. The platform, the crowd, the way he'd looked at her like she was human. She wasn't used to that. She wasn't used to anything except commands, silence, and the slap of a hand when she dared to speak. But this man, Thatcher Reed, he hadn't even asked her to thank him, hadn't said she owed him, and that made her more afraid than if he'd yelled. Because if this was kindness, then surely it came with a price she couldn't yet see. "Eat," he said without turning. His voice was quiet but firm. She looked beside her and found a piece of bread and a tin cup with something warm inside. She sniffed it, watered coffee, bitter but not unpleasant. She drank slowly, unsure if it was a test, but he never turned to watch. He just packed his gear like a man used to doing for one. After a few minutes, he finally faced her. "We ride until midday," he said. "There's a trading post up north, shelter, food, then another day to the ranch." Clara stared. "You have a ranch?" He nodded once. "A few acres, livestock, barn, nothing fancy." She swallowed. "And you live there alone?" "Most days." She didn't ask why, not yet. The road north was hard-packed and lined with low brush and wide-open fields that felt too exposed. Clara clung to the saddle horn in front of her as they rode, trying not to think about how sore her legs already were. Thatcher didn't talk much, but when he did, it was to point things out, not in a teaching way, just simple observations. "Deer went through here. Clouds breaking west. Water's low this time of year." Clara nodded, unsure if he expected her to reply. Sometimes she did. Most times she just listened, her eyes darting toward every shadow, every movement in the grass. By midday they reached the post, a sagging building that leaned like it had been bracing against wind for 100 years. A few horses tied outside. No wagons. Thatcher dismounted and helped Clara down without speaking. Inside, the air smelled of dust and dried meat. An old man behind the counter gave Thatcher a nod, then looked at Clara with suspicion. "Don't look like kin," the man muttered. Thatcher didn't blink. "Ain't your business." The man shrugged, went back to counting cans. Thatcher bought flour, coffee, dried beans, and a new pair of boots, small ones. He slid them toward Clara without a word. She stared at them, then at him. "I don't." "They'll fit," he said. "Your feet are bleeding." Clara looked down and saw he was right. She hadn't even noticed. The ache had become so normal she forgot what it meant. They left the post in silence, and she wore the boots out. They pinched at first but softened quickly. She kept glancing at them as they rode, afraid they might vanish if she blinked too long. By nightfall they reached a ridge that overlooked a wide valley. Clara gasped. Below, lit faintly by the rising moon, stood a small house, a barn, and a fenced-in pasture. Smoke curled from a chimney, and the faint sound of a windmill creaked in the breeze. "That's it," Thatcher said. Clara didn't speak. Her throat had tightened. They descended slowly, the horse picking its way down the trail until the land flattened. Thatcher dismounted and opened the gate, leading the horse inside. Clara stayed quiet, absorbing every detail, the rough porch, the woodpile, the empty rocking chair facing west. He helped her down again, then stood back. "This is your home now," he said. She looked at him, eyes wide. "But—" "No buts. I don't know how to be in a house." He raised an eyebrow. "You know how to breathe." She nodded. "Then you'll figure the rest." He didn't say it kindly, he said it like fact, and somehow that made it easier to believe. Inside, the cabin was simple. One main room, a kitchen to the side, a ladder leading to a loft above. The air smelled like wood smoke and leather. Clara stepped in slowly, afraid to touch anything. Her fingers hovered over the back of a chair, over the edge of the table, over the blanket folded near the fire. Thatcher removed his coat, hung it on a peg, then set to making a stew with the calm efficiency of someone used to solitude. He moved around her without notice, like she belonged already. She sat at the table. He slid a bowl in front of her. And finally she asked, "Why'd you take me?" He didn't look up. "I've seen too many children sold," he said. "Didn't stop it, thought maybe I could now." "That all?" He paused, then looked at her. "You looked like someone who needed a place to be more than a name on a bill of sale." Clara stared at her food. After a moment she whispered, "They said I was like her." Thatcher didn't ask. "My mama, they said I had her eyes, and that made it worse. That's why Harlan took me, said he couldn't stand the way I looked at him." She bit her lip. "I thought maybe God forgot about me." Thatcher's jaw tensed. "He didn't," he said. "But some men pretend he don't see. Those are the ones who need to be reminded." She didn't know what to say to that. After supper he showed her the loft. There was a small bed, clean sheets, and a lantern. She touched the quilt like it was gold. "You need anything," he said, "just come down." Clara nodded. But when the stairs creaked as he descended, she called after him. "Thatcher." He turned. "Do I work here like a hand?" He hesitated. "No." "Then what am I?" He didn't blink. "You're Clara Reed," he said. "That's enough." Then he left her with that name, echoing in her ears like the most beautiful lie she'd ever heard. She didn't sleep much that night, not because of fear, but because of the terrifying thought that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a lie after all. The next morning came soft and gray, with the kind of quiet that settled into the bones and whispered, "You're safe now." But Clara didn't trust that feeling yet. She sat up in the loft, the quilt pulled tight to her chest, watching the sunlight creep through the cracks in the shutters. Below her she could hear movement, boots against wood, the creak of the stove door, the gentle clink of iron on iron. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't angry. It sounded like a man starting a day the same way he had for years. She crept down the ladder barefoot, boots in hand. She'd been too afraid to sleep in them, afraid if she took them for granted they'd vanish. Thatcher stood at the stove, flipping cornbread onto a plate, steam curling up around his face. He looked over. "You sleep?" Clara nodded. "Eat," he said, gesturing with his chin. She took the plate and sat at the table, the chair legs scraping lightly against the floor. She waited for him to say something more, for a warning, a rule, a chore, but he just poured coffee and sat across from her. After a few bites, she finally asked, "What do you want me to do today?" Thatcher didn't answer right away. "Then whatever you can." She blinked. "I mean chores, jobs." He sipped his coffee, then set the cup down. "You see something that needs doing, do it. You don't, you rest. That simple." "But I'm not earning my keep." Thatcher leaned back. "This ain't about earning." She studied him for a long moment, her hands clenched around the cornbread. "You're gonna send me away," she said, not asking. "No." "But you will, when you get tired of me, when I mess up." Thatcher's eyes sharpened. "You will mess up," he said. "So will I. That's life. Doesn't mean I throw you away." "But that's what folks do." "Not here." The finality in his voice silenced her. After breakfast, Thatcher headed out to tend the livestock and Clara followed. He didn't tell her to, but he didn't stop her either. She stayed a few paces behind, watching as he fed the goats, checked the chickens, shoveled hay into the stall. She picked up a broom and swept the barn aisle. He watched, said nothing. By midday, the sun had broken through the clouds, casting long golden beams across the dry fields. Thatcher handed her a small rake and gestured to the garden patch behind the barn. Turn the soil, doesn't have to be perfect. She worked quietly, her fingers raw but determined. She liked the way the dirt felt between her fingers, like something that didn't care who you were, only that you showed up. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the wind picked up, they sat on the porch in silence. Thatcher smoked his pipe, and Clara nursed a chipped cup of milk, her boots dangling off the edge of the step. She broke the quiet. "Did you have a daughter?" The pipe paused halfway to his lips. He didn't speak for a long time. "No." "Wife?" He took a slow drag. "Yes." Clara waited, but he didn't say more. She figured that was all she'd get. But then quietly, cancer came fast, took her faster. Clara looked down at her cup. "I'm sorry." He didn't nod, didn't say thank you, just looked out over the field, jaw tight. "I see her sometimes," he said, "in dreams, or when the light hits the table just right. I think she'd like you." Clara's throat tightened. No one had ever said something like that to her before, not even her mama. She didn't know how to respond, so she just sat with it, letting it settle into her chest like something precious. That night she dreamed of red ribbons and warm bread, of laughter that didn't echo off stone walls. She dreamed of her mama, not scared, not crying, but smiling, eyes wide with peace. But peace was always temporary. 3 days passed, each one steadier than the last. Clara learned the routine: feed the goats, haul water, patch the chicken coop. She liked the quiet, liked the way Thatcher never hovered, never shouted, never made her feel small. He spoke when needed, listened more often than not. Sometimes they'd sit in the barn after chores, just breathing in the smell of hay and old wood. But peace doesn't last long on the frontier. It was the 4th morning when the knock came. Not on the door. On the gate. Thatcher and Clara were in the barn when they heard it, a sharp, deliberate clang of the iron latch being lifted and dropped. Once, then again. Thatcher stiffened. He stood slowly, set down the feed bucket and grabbed his rifle from the wall. Clara froze. He looked at her. "Inside," he said. She ran. At the window, she peeked through the slats as 2 riders entered the yard. Both were dressed in dust-dark coats, wide-brimmed hats casting their faces in shadow. The lead rider dismounted, tall and wiry, with a crooked stance that screamed trouble. Thatcher stepped onto the porch, gun resting against his shoulder. "Morning," he said. The man spat into the dirt. "Heard you took in a girl." Thatcher didn't blink. "Who's asking?" "Name S. Pierce. I work with Harlan Coyle. He says that girl's his." "She's not." "Well," Pierce said, smiling thinly, "that's a funny thing. See, he's got papers. Said he paid for her. Says she ran off." "She didn't run," Thatcher said. "She walked and I paid." "Receipt." Thatcher didn't answer. Pierce chuckled. "Didn't think so." From the second horse the other man slid down, stockier, younger. His fingers twitched near his hip where a revolver sat in a worn leather holster. Pierce stepped forward. "Look, I ain't here to start nothing, but you give us the girl and we'll be on our way." Thatcher didn't move. Pierce's voice hardened. "She's not yours." "She is now." A silence fell. Then the stocky man spoke. "You're gonna die for a stray." Thatcher's voice was like ice. "She's not a stray." Inside, Clara's heart thundered in her chest. Pierce looked at his partner. "Get the rope." That's when Thatcher raised the rifle. "Touch anything in that yard," he said, "and I'll bury you in it." The 2 men froze. Then Pierce raised both hands. "Easy now." Thatcher stepped forward. "You come back here again," he said. "You best bring a preacher and a coffin." Pierce hesitated, then slowly backed toward his horse. The stocky one followed, face pale. They mounted, spurred, rode. The dust hadn't even settled before Clara burst through the door and ran to the porch. "They're gone," she said, breathless. Thatcher watched the trail. "Not for long." Clara stood beside him, trembling. "You'll send me away now," she said. "No. But they'll come back. I know. You'll get hurt. Maybe. Then why are you doing this?" Thatcher looked at her. "Because when I saw you up there shaking in the sun, I thought about what it'd mean to walk away, to leave you to that." He took a breath. "I've done a lot I ain't proud of, Clara, but this I'll fight for." She swallowed hard. "Even if it gets you killed?" He nodded. She stepped closer, voice barely a whisper. "Then I'll fight too." And though he didn't smile, not fully, something in Thatcher's face softened. That night they locked the doors, boarded the windows, loaded the guns. Clara slept with her boots beside her bed, her red ribbon found in a forgotten satchel tied around her wrist. Because she knew now. This wasn't just a place. It was a line in the sand. And she wasn't running anymore. The wind howled across the plain like it carried voices from long ago, whispers of warning, of blood, of sorrow soaked into the very soil. Thatcher stood by the barn fence at dawn, eyes fixed on the horizon. The sky bled orange and bruised gray as the sun rose slow behind a veil of thin clouds. He hadn't slept, not really. Neither had Clara. She'd spent the night sitting cross-legged in the loft, cradling the old rifle Thatcher had handed her. It was too big for her arms, too heavy for her frame, but she held it like it was the only thing keeping her from being dragged back into the past. She didn't ask what would happen next. She already knew. Trouble always comes back when it's humiliated. And Thatcher hadn't just sent those men away, he'd shamed them. And men like that didn't forget shame. They came back with twice the fury and half the sense. It was only a matter of time. By noon, Thatcher had reinforced the door, filled water buckets, salted meat, and moved extra feed into the cellar. Clara helped without being asked. She hauled, packed, tied rope, and gathered dry wood. It felt strange, doing these things not because she was told but because she wanted to be useful, wanted to be ready. Wanted to belong. "Your hands'll blister if you don't slow down," Thatcher warned as she stacked the last bundle of kindling. She shrugged, blisters heal. He didn't argue, just nodded once and handed her a strip of jerky. They ate in silence. Then Clara asked, "Why don't you run?" Thatcher looked at her. "From what?" "From them, from the trouble." His jaw tightened. "Because it wouldn't fix nothing," he said. "Running just means they win slower." She nodded, eyes lowered. Thatcher leaned back against the post. "I ran once," he admitted. "Long time ago, left a boy behind, thought I was saving him by getting out. Truth is, I just didn't want to face the fight." Clara looked up. "What happened to him?" Thatcher didn't answer for a long time. "He's buried up near Pine Ridge," he said finally. "Small cross, no name, I visit every year." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to ask more, but something in his face said that door had closed. They spent the afternoon practicing. Thatcher set up empty bottles along the fence line, showed Clara how to hold the rifle properly, how to breathe, how to fire without flinching. Her arms shook. Her shoulder ached. But she hit 2 out of 6, and Thatcher gave her the smallest nod of approval she'd ever seen. It meant more than any praise. By sundown, the sky darkened again, not with storm but with tension. Birds had gone quiet. The wind died to a stillness that prickled the skin. Thatcher stood at the porch rail, staring down the trail as if waiting for it to scream back at him. Clara came out, with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "You think they'll come tonight?" He didn't look at her. "They're men, not ghosts, but they know how to haunt." "Will you kill them?" "If they try to take you," he said, "they'll wish they hadn't." Clara stepped closer, her voice low. "Will you kill them, even if I tell you not to?" He turned to her then, really turned. Her eyes were wide, not afraid but pleading. "I don't want blood," she whispered, "not for me." Thatcher studied her face, the hard-earned defiance woven with something gentler. He nodded once. "Then we find another way." She swallowed. "What if there is no other way?" "Then we buy time, and pray that time gives us a door to something else." That night they ate quietly, a stew of potatoes and beans. The fire cracked low. Clara wore one of Thatcher's old coats, sleeves rolled twice, her small hands barely poking out. She looked like a child trying to wear the world, but her eyes weren't a child's eyes. They were watchful, knowing. "Tell me about your mama," Thatcher said as he sipped coffee. Clara blinked. "No one ever asked before." "I'm asking." She stared into her bowl. She was strong, not loud strong, but the kind that made you want to sit close just to feel it. She sang when she worked, not songs with words, just sounds that felt like they belonged to the wind. Clara smiled faintly. She made dresses out of flour sacks, said if the world gave us scraps, we'd still walk proud, said pretty things didn't need permission to exist. Thatcher listened without interrupting. "They took her," Clara said, voice tightening. "Said she'd have better luck out west, that she'd send money back, but she never did, and I know why now." "She didn't leave you," Thatcher said quietly. "No," Clara agreed, "she was taken." There was a long pause. "I don't want to be like her," she whispered. Thatcher tilted his head. "Your mama was strong." "I mean, I don't want to be taken, or forgotten." "You won't be." "How do you know?" "Because I've buried too many regrets," he said. "I won't add you to them." Midnight came heavy. The fire burned low. Thatcher sat in the chair by the window, rifle across his lap. Clara lay curled under the quilt on the couch, eyes closed but mind wide awake. Then hooves. Distant, faint, measured. Thatcher sat upright. Clara's eyes flew open. The hooves grew louder, not fast, not urgent, just approaching. Thatcher stood, walked to the window, peered through the gap in the curtain. 3 riders. Not 4, not 10, just 3, but it was enough. He turned. "Cellar," he said. Clara stood. "No." "Cellar." I said no. He didn't argue, just handed her the pistol from the drawer. "They come and shooting," he said. "You shoot back." She nodded. The knock on the door was polite. A lie in its very sound. Thatcher opened it slowly. Pierre stood there smiling again. That same smug grin, that same revolver at his hip. "Evening," he said. "Thought we'd drop in, polite-like." "Say your piece," Thatcher said. "We had us a conversation, if you recall, about a girl, a debt unpaid." "I recall you threatening me." Pierce chuckled. "All depends how you hear things. We don't want trouble." Thatcher stepped onto the porch, rifle still in hand. "Then ride on." "But see," Pierce said, stepping closer, "trouble already found you, and folks around here, they don't take kindly to men harboring thieves." "Who's she supposed to have stolen from?" Thatcher asked. "Me," came a voice from behind the second rider. Harlan Coyle. Drunk again, face red, hat crooked. "She stole my money, my horse, my dog." "She stole your dignity," Thatcher said, "when she walked away from you." Harlan spat. "She's mine." "No," Thatcher said, "she's Clara Reed now." Pierce's smile faded. "You claiming her?" "I already did." There was a pause, one breath, too. Then a shot rang out. Not from the porch. From inside. "Clara!" One of the riders screamed and fell from his horse, gun flying from his hand. Clara stood at the window, pistol smoking, breath ragged. "I said," she shouted, "I'm not going back." Pierce turned, rage flashing. "You little." Thatcher's rifle cracked. Pierce dropped. Silence followed, deafening, no one moved. Harlan stood frozen, mouth open, hands trembling. "You want to join them?" Thatcher asked, voice like gravel. Harlan turned, mounted, rode. No goodbyes, no threats, just fear in the saddle. Thatcher lowered the rifle, turned to the window. Clara was shaking, not from fear, from release. He stepped inside. "You all right?" She nodded. "I aimed low, I wasn't trying to kill." "You saved me." She swallowed. "I just couldn't let them take it all again." Thatcher reached for her shoulder, rested a hand there firm and warm. "You didn't." That night neither of them slept. They just sat by the fire, side by side, watching the flames rise and fall. Because they knew. Trouble might come again. But now it'd have to get through both of them. Morning didn't break so much as bleed across the horizon, a slow spill of red and gray that painted the frostbitten field in bruised light. Clara stood barefoot at the edge of the porch, boots dangling from one hand, the cold biting at her toes. But she didn't step back. She faced the trail where the dust still hadn't fully settled from the night before, as if her eyes could hold the road still. Her small frame leaned against the post, stiff with something deeper than fear, resolve. Behind her, the door creaked open. Thatcher stepped out, already dressed, his hat low over his brow, steam curling from the tin cup in his hand. He didn't speak, just stood beside her in the quiet, letting the weight of the morning settle. Clara finally broke the silence. "They'll come back, won't they?" He nodded. "Word'll spread. Harlan won't take the loss quiet. He'll find someone meaner to do the shouting." She exhaled slowly. "Good." That made him glance down. "I'm tired of being scared," she added, voice low. "Tired of waiting for men like him to tell me who I am." He didn't answer, but his silence felt like an agreement. They spent the morning burying the man Clara had shot. He hadn't died, not right away. The bullet had torn through his leg, and Thatcher had dragged him into the barn, tied the wound as best he could, and offered water. The man refused it. He cursed Clara with his last breath and died sometime before dawn, still bleeding anger into the straw. Thatcher wrapped him in canvas, dug a grave near the tree line, and said no words as he covered the body. Clara stood nearby, arms folded tight across her chest, watching every shovel of dirt like it was proof she'd never be taken again. Later, inside, she helped Thatcher clean the rifle. "Was he your first?" he asked. She didn't answer at first. "No," she said finally, "but he's the first that mattered." That night Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the roof beams, listening to the crackle of the fire below, the occasional cough from Thatcher's chair, the long silence between breaths. She sat up, pulled the quilt tight, and crept down the ladder. Thatcher looked up as she approached. "I keep seeing him," she said, sitting on the floor beside the fire. "His face, the way he fell." "You didn't kill him out of hate," Thatcher said. "You killed him because you had to." "I didn't want to. No one decent ever does." She looked at him. "Have you wanted to?" She nodded. He stared into the flames. "Once. Did you do it?" "No," he said, "but I wanted to, and I still think about it." "Do you regret not doing it?" Thatcher's jaw clenched. "I regret the reason I wanted to." They sat in silence a long while. "I keep thinking about Mama," Clara whispered. "How she would have held me after something like this. She used to run her fingers through my hair, real slow, when I cried. Said it was like combing out the knots in the soul." Thatcher's throat worked around something heavy. "She'd be proud of you. She'd be scared for me. Maybe, but still proud." Clara leaned her head against the chair leg. "Can I stay here? I mean, always?" He looked down at her. The firelight danced in her hair, casting shadows on her cheek. "This is your home," he said, "for as long as you want it. And if I leave someday, then I'll watch the trail until you come back." She didn't answer, but her breathing steadied. She fell asleep right there on the rug, the fire warming her toes, the knowledge of safety wrapping tighter than any blanket. The next morning brought more than just cold. It brought whispers. Thatcher rode into town for supplies, leaving Clara with a shotgun and instructions to stay indoors. She obeyed, but she watched the road. When Thatcher returned, his face was darker than she'd ever seen it. "What happened?" she asked as he stepped down from the saddle. "Nothing yet," he said, "but it's coming." He carried more than just flour and coffee. He had nails, boards, rope, and oil. He handed Clara a sack of books and a tin of peppermints. "I don't like candy," she lied. "Then I guess I'll eat 'em." She smiled despite herself. Inside, while he boarded up the windows tighter, Clara opened the books. Worn covers, dog-eared pages, old names scrawled in the corners. One was a Bible, edges flaking. Another was a book of poetry. She flipped through them slowly, as if she might find something forgotten. That night she read aloud while Thatcher whittled. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. He said nothing, just kept carving. Until she paused. "Do you miss them?" He didn't ask who. All the time, he said. Clara set the book down. Tell me something good, she said, from before. He looked at the figure in his hand, some kind of bird, not yet shaped. My wife used to hum when she peeled apples, he said. A little tune, over and over, drove me near mad, but now I'd give anything to hear it again. Clara nodded. Mama used to tap the side of the pot with her spoon, like a heartbeat. They sat with that for a long time. But peace, as always, was borrowed time. The next day, Thatcher didn't return from the barn. Clara waited until the sun sank low, until the shadows crept longer than they should have. Then she went looking. She found him slumped against the far stall, one hand clutching his side, blood seeping through his shirt. Thatcher. She dropped beside him, heart pounding. Rattler, he rasped, coiled near the feed, didn't see it. Her hands flew, pressing, tying, trying to stop the red. Don't move, she whispered. Don't you dare. He tried to smile, but it twisted with pain. You're gonna be fine, she said, panic rising. You know what to do. She nodded fast. Boil water, clean it, keep the wound high. You'll have to ride, he said. Town's a day out, maybe more. I can't leave you. You can and you will. Clara's eyes filled, but she blinked hard. I've never. You can, he said again, firmer now. She swallowed. I will. That night she packed what she could, bandaged him tight, left water and fire and wrapped him in quilts. I'll be back, she whispered. Thatcher's fingers closed weakly around her wrist. You're my daughter, he said, voice thin. Don't ever forget it. She didn't answer, just ran. Into the night. Into the cold. Into the dark that had once swallowed her whole, but would never do so again. The trail was a ribbon of frost beneath a sky that refused to brighten. Trees loomed like silent judges, their bare branches scratching at the dawn, and Clara rode through it all with her hands trembling against the reins. The horse, Thatcher's gelding, Ash, moved steady beneath her, his breath puffing in clouds, hooves muffled against the frozen ground. She hadn't ridden this far alone before, but there was no time to be afraid. Not when Thatcher lay curled in the barn with venom in his veins, and sweat soaking the floorboards beneath him. She didn't cry, not even once, not when the cold burned her cheeks or when her legs cramped from gripping the saddle too long. She rode with the rope of his words wrapped around her ribs. You're my daughter. Don't ever forget it, over and over in her head like a drumbeat. By noon she reached the first ridge, and the land opened up into a shallow basin where smoke rose faintly in the distance. Bellstone, the town that had once tried to sell her like a mule. She hadn't seen it since the day Thatcher bought her, not with money, but with something deeper. Ash moved slower now. He was tired, same as she was, but he didn't quit. When they reached the edge of town, Clara slid down and led him through the muddy street, her coat dragging against her boots, her fingers locked in his mane for warmth. People stared. They always did. But this time she stared back. She walked straight to the post, where the small doctor's house sat crooked beside the blacksmith's forge. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside. A man looked up from behind a desk, gray-haired, spectacles fogged, hands ink-stained from notes and charts. Yes. Clara stepped forward. I need help, there's been a snake bite, he's got fever, swelling, can't ride. The doctor squinted. Who? Thatcher Reed. That changed the air. The man stood slowly. He's still out there. Yes, please, I came alone. He won't make it if we don't go back today. The doctor rubbed his jaw. Long ride. I brought his horse, mine stronger, you can ride her. She got stamina. She carried me here through the night. He didn't ask more, just nodded and began gathering supplies, a leather bag of vials, bandages, a small iron box marked with a cross. He moved with the calm urgency of someone who'd done this before. Clara waited, heart in her throat, eyes fixed on the door. Then it opened again. And everything stopped. Harlan Coyle stepped inside, his hat low, the stink of tobacco and rot clinging to him like shadow. He didn't see Clara at first, not until the doctor glanced between them, stiffening. Then Harlan looked and smiled. Well now, if it ain't the little crow come home. Clara took a step back, hand instinctively reaching for the small knife in her boot. "I ain't here for you," she said. "No," he stepped closer. "Looks like you brought yourself right back to my doorstep." "I came for medicine." "She came for Thatcher," the doctor cut in. "He's been bit. I'm riding out with her." Harlan's eyes narrowed. Why waste good herbs on a fool who stuck his hand where it didn't belong? Clara's voice cracked through the room like a whip. "He saved me." "That right?" Harlan grinned too wide. "Well, you tell your savior when he dies, I'll be waiting to collect what's mine." "She's not yours," the doctor snapped. Harlan leaned forward, nose inches from Clara's. "You hear that, girl?" he hissed. "You ain't anyone's, not really. Sooner or later you'll be back in the mud where you came from. That man, he's just a stop on the way." Clara didn't move, didn't blink, just said one word. "No," and turned her back to him. They rode out within the hour, Clara leading, the doctor behind. The wind picked up, sharp and cruel, but Ash plowed forward unyielding. It took the better part of the day to reach the ridge. The sky dimmed again, snow threatening at the edges, and Clara felt the air tighten as they neared the homestead. She ran the last 100 yards on foot, stumbling through the gate, heart clawing up her throat. "Thatcher," she shouted, throwing open the barn door. He was still there barely, his skin pale, jaw clenched, hands twitching in restless half-dreams. The bandage she'd tied was soaked through, the wound swollen and angry. The doctor pushed past her, fell to his knees. "Get water," he ordered, "clean cloth, whiskey if you've got it." Clara obeyed. The next hours blurred. The doctor worked fast, cutting the wound wider, pressing herbs into the torn flesh, wrapping the limb with soaked linen. Thatcher groaned once, then fell still. The fever had him now. "He'll make it?" Clara asked. The doctor sighed. "He's strong, but fever's got claws. All we can do now is wait." Clara didn't leave his side. She sat beside the bed, wiping his brow with cool rags, reading from the worn poetry book even when he didn't respond. She whispered prayers, not ones she remembered from church, but ones her mama had hummed over soup and laundry and stitched hymns. "Please, Lord, just let him stay." 2 nights passed like that, fever, sweat, shivers, muttered words that made no sense. Then on the 3rd morning, Thatcher opened his eyes. Dry, bloodshot, but awake. Clara gasped. "You came back," she whispered. "Didn't know I left," he rasped. She pressed a cup to his lips. "Water." He drank, coughed, smiled faintly. "You rode alone." She nodded. He stared at her for a long moment. "Good girl," he whispered. And that was all he managed before sleep claimed him again. The doctor stayed another day, then packed his things. "He'll need rest, weeks of it, but he'll live." Clara stood at the door as he mounted up. "Thank you," she said. He tipped his hat. "You're braver than most men I've known," and rode off into the snow. Clara went back inside, sat by the fire, stared at the flames. She felt hollowed out, like the fear had burned so hot it left nothing behind but ash and nerves. But under the surface, deep, deep down, was something new. Not just survival. Root. She tended the ranch on her own, fed the goats, split wood, cooked meals. Thatcher watched from the window at first, weak but recovering. Each day he stayed awake longer, spoke a little more. "You're doing fine," he said once. Clara didn't answer. Because she wasn't doing it for praise. She was doing it because this place, this man, meant something now. It wasn't a stop, it was a line in the ground. And she was ready to fight for it. But fights don't always come with warning. 2 weeks later, while Thatcher was still too weak to stand, Clara found the ribbon. Red, frayed, tied to the porch rail like a flag. A message. She froze. Thatcher saw it too from the window. His face hardened. "They're coming," he said. Clara nodded. This time they wouldn't knock. They'd come to take everything. And she would be ready. The red ribbon flapped in the wind like a warning left by ghosts, quiet, deliberate, unmistakable. Clara didn't touch it, she just stared. The porch rail where it hung had been sanded smooth by time, weathered by hands both kind and cruel. Now it carried a message clearer than any bullet: "We're coming, and you belong to us." She stepped back into the cabin and shut the door without a word. Thatcher sat in the chair by the fire, legs draped with a quilt, a rifle across his lap. He was pale, still thin from the fever, but there was steel in his eyes again. The kind that doesn't rust. The kind that doesn't beg. "They want blood now," Clara said. "Not just to take me, they want to ruin us." He nodded. "They'll burn the cabin, maybe kill the animals first, try to break you slow." "I won't let them." "You can't stop fire with fists, Clara." "I've got more than fists." He looked at her. And this time when she said it, there was no fear, only promise. "We won't run, right?" "No," Thatcher said, voice low. "We stand." She moved through the cabin like a ghost with a hammer, quiet, focused, building defenses where none had existed before. She soaked cloth in kerosene and packed it into bottles. She nailed slats over the windows. She dug a trench around the porch, filled it with sharp rocks and broken glass. Every movement sharpened her. Every task carved the girl into something else. Thatcher coached her between fits of rest. He showed her how to reset the traps near the tree line, how to place a mirror near the window to see both sides of the yard. He mapped out a plan with sticks and stones on the table like a battlefield. "You're not just defending a home," he told her. "You're defending a name." That night Clara braided her hair tight and tied the red ribbon at the end, not as surrender but as defiance. If they came for her, they'd see the color and remember who they'd tried to break. And who still stood. The next day passed in silence. No visitors, no horses, just the wind and the low hum of dread. Clara checked the traps twice, sharpened the knives, loaded every firearm in the house. At dusk, Thatcher called her to the table. "I've got something," he said. He reached beneath the floorboards and pulled out a small tin box. Inside, a chain, a pocket knife, and a folded piece of paper. "I meant to give you this when the time was right." She opened it slowly. It was a deed, handwritten, sealed. "To Clara Reed," it read, "on account of loyalty, courage, and the right to belong." She looked up, eyes wide. "I'm signing it tonight," Thatcher said, "witness or no. But this land's yours now." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her throat was too full. "I thought," she finally whispered, "I thought maybe you'd change your mind." "I did," he said. "At first, I thought I was just taking in a girl who needed a roof. And now I know I've got a daughter." She didn't cry, not because she didn't feel it, but because there was no time left for softness. They rode in at night. 6 riders. No torches, no words, just the sudden crack of hooves and the sound of saddle leather snapping in the cold. Clara was on the roof when she saw them, a shadowy line moving across the field like a cut of darkness come to finish what it started. She dropped into position beside the loft window, heart hammering. Thatcher sat in the armchair, rifle in hand, barrel pointed at the door. "Positions," he whispered. Clara moved like smoke. They came hard. First they shot the chickens, not by mistake, on purpose, to make noise, to make her panic. Then came the porch, 2 riders stepping onto the boards like they already owned them. Thatcher fired once. The first man dropped, face first, into the dirt. The second ducked, fired back, hitting the window frame inches from Clara's head. She didn't flinch, she returned fire. The man howled and fell back into the yard. Someone lit a torch and hurled it at the roof. Clara was already there. She stomped it out with a wet blanket, then dropped a glass bottle onto the attacker below. It burst in flame. He screamed. Another rider came through the back, quiet, fast, knife drawn. But Thatcher saw his shadow in the mirror. He shot through the wall. The man didn't get up. 3 left. They regrouped behind the barn. Clara could hear them shouting, plans, threats, curses. She crawled through the crawlspace and slipped out the root cellar, circling wide. Her boots made no sound in the frozen grass. She got within 20 feet before they noticed. She raised her rifle. "I've got a deed with my name on it," she said. "You burned this place, and you're not just trespassers, you're thieves." One of them turned, Pierce's brother, tall and cruel like him, scar across his jaw. "You're just a girl." Clara fired. The bullet hit his shoulder, spinning him sideways. The others ran. Cowards in the dark. She walked them to the fence line, rifle raised, heart calm. "I'm not a girl anymore," she said. "I'm Clara Reed." They vanished into the trees. Back at the cabin, the fire burned low. Thatcher was pale but alive. 4 men lay bleeding in the yard. One was still moaning. Clara dragged him to the barn, bandaged the wound, left him water and a piece of bread. "You'll ride when you can," she said, "and you'll tell Harlan next time I won't miss." The man nodded, eyes wide with something deeper than fear. It was respect. She returned to the house just as the sun cracked the sky open in pink and gold. Thatcher was asleep, the rifle still across his lap. She pulled it gently from his hands and leaned it against the wall. Outside, the wind had shifted. There was peace again. Not borrowed. Earned. The dawn that followed didn't roar or scream. It exhaled. Light crept over the valley like a promise, slow and shy, touching the trees with gold and kissing the frost until it wept. Clara sat on the porch with her knees pulled tight to her chest, Thatcher's coat draped over her shoulders. Her face was smudged with soot. Her hands were scraped raw, but she didn't care, because she'd stood her ground. She hadn't run. She hadn't been taken. The red ribbon was still in her hair, tied with a knot firm as her will. Behind her, the door creaked and she turned. Thatcher stepped out slowly, one hand gripping the frame for balance, the other cradling a tin mug. He looked pale still, leaner than before, but upright, alive. "Shouldn't be walking yet," she said, soft. "I've sat too long," he replied, lowering himself onto the chair beside her with a groan. "Legs'll forget how." They sat in silence a moment, listening to the land breathe. "Found my name last night," Clara said after a while. Thatcher sipped his coffee, glancing sideways. "Yeah. It's not just something people call me, not just letters Mama whispered when she still had breath. It's something I fought to keep, something I earned." He nodded. "It's yours now, in ink and in grit." "Reed," she said again, slower. "I like how it sounds in my mouth." "You should," he muttered, stubborn enough to be one. She smiled, not wide but deep. They watched the sun lift higher, burning away the shadow and what remained of the night's terror. The bodies had been buried already, 2 unmarked graves beneath the oak tree by the north fence. The survivor had ridden off at first light, saddle heavy with silence. He hadn't looked back. Thatcher and Clara didn't chase him. Some ghosts needed to be released so they'd carry your story far. Let the rest know you weren't easy pickings. Inside, the cabin bore scars, bullet holes in the wall, a cracked window, a scorched rafter in the kitchen. But it stood, like them. "Spring's not far," Thatcher said. Clara tilted her head. "How can you tell?" "Birds," he replied. "They sing different when the cold's loosening." "I don't hear them." He smiled faintly. "You will." Later that day, they rode into Bellstone, not hiding, not sneaking, but proud and straight-backed. Clara wore the dress she'd patched herself, the ribbon still in her hair. Thatcher had shaved, his coat mended at the seams, boots polished. The townsfolk watched them come like they were seeing ghosts ride into town, not because of fear but awe. They stopped at the sheriff's office. Thatcher knocked once, twice. Sheriff Danvers answered, eyebrows lifting high at the sight of them. "Well, I'll be." "We've got business," Thatcher said. Clara stepped forward, holding the signed deed. "She owns the land," Thatcher continued. 12 acres, titles clean, notarized and witnessed by Doc Hervey. Danvers took the paper, examined it. "This true?" The doctor stepped from the side room. "Signed it myself." Danvers looked from Clara to Thatcher. "Then it's legal." "Good," Clara said. She wasn't smiling, just standing tall. "Because if Harlan Coyle shows his face again, I want it on record. He's trespassing, and we'll treat him as such." Danvers cleared his throat. "Understood." They left the paper, turned to go. But just before they reached the edge of the boardwalk, a voice rang out. "Clara." She turned. A woman stepped forward, thin, gray-haired, eyes sunken with grief. "I knew your mother," she said. Clara froze. "She worked for me once," the woman continued, before they took her." "What was her name to you?" Clara asked, voice like flint. "Lita, she sang in the morning, I remember that." Clara's breath caught. She was kind, the woman said. She was scared, but she never let it show. She talked about you every day. Said you were the only thing in the world that felt like hope. Clara blinked back tears. She didn't come back. No, the woman said, voice breaking. They lied, told her you'd be better off elsewhere, that she was too broken to raise a child. I told her to fight, but I didn't do enough. I'm sorry. Clara stared, then stepped forward. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the ribbon. She gave me this, she whispered. Said red meant freedom. I used to think she was wrong. The woman reached out but didn't touch her. She was right, Clara said. She just didn't live to see it. Back at the cabin, Clara planted a small stake near the porch, wooden, rough, carved with her initials. Beside it another, LR for Lita Reed. Not because they had a grave, but because they needed a place to remember. Spring came with rain and slow winds. The goats birthed twins. The garden took root. Thatcher regained his strength, walking further each day, teaching Clara how to mend saddles and file horseshoes. They built a second chicken coop, added a fence near the western edge. Neighbors started dropping by not to stare but to offer help. A woman named Ruth brought blankets. A boy named Sam brought flour. They didn't ask questions. They just saw Clara for what she was, a girl with a spine of iron and a name earned through fire. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge and the valley glowed amber, Thatcher pulled a package from the shelf. "What's that?" Clara asked. He handed it over. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a brand new journal, leather-bound, pages clean and wide. "I figured," he said, "you've lived enough for a book." She opened it, ran her fingers over the first page. "What should I call it?" He shrugged. "Your story, your title." She thought a moment, then wrote, "Sold like Mama was." Below that in smaller letters. But then he called me daughter, and underlined daughter twice. That night, as the stars blinked above the mountains and the wind rustled the wheat, Clara Reed closed the journal and curled up in the chair by the fire. Thatcher sat beside her, pipe smoke curling in lazy loops above his head. She watched the flames, listened to the creak of the house, the rhythm of peace hard-won, and smiled. For the first time, it wasn't because she was pretending. It was because she finally knew the truth. She hadn't just survived. She had lived. And no one, no man, no law, no memory, could ever take that from her again. The land changed with the season, but Clara noticed it most in the way the wind moved. It no longer howled like a warning or crept in like a thief. Now it danced between the trees, brushed the fields like a mother tucking in a child. The sun hung longer each day. The frost melted sooner, and birds had returned to the barn roof, their songs no longer sounding like eulogies. 3 months had passed since the last rider fell, since the ribbon on the porch had warned of war, since Clara Reed had stood between her home and the world and told it, no. She'd expected the peace to feel loud somehow like applause, but instead it was soft, earned, real. The ranch grew not in size but in shape. The corners of it softened. Thatcher rebuilt the linta beside the barn, and Clara added shelves for seed and books. The porch was scrubbed and patched, and the bullet hole in the window frame stayed exactly where it was. A reminder, not of fear, but of what had been overcome. Every morning, Clara rode the perimeter, not out of fear anymore, but habit. She rode to remind herself that the land was theirs, that the trees still bowed in the wind, and that no man's boots had touched their soil since the last burial. Clara froze mid-step, the bucket of feed in her hand swaying. "What does it say?" He read in silence, then folded the letter slowly and looked up. "You've been summoned." Her heart stopped. "Why?" "To testify against Harlan." Clara didn't breathe. "They're charging him?" she asked. Thatcher nodded. "Slavery, fraud, kidnapping, more." A pause. "He won't see light again if they get him." She sat down hard. "I thought it was over." "It's never over," he said gently, "but it can be finished." The trial was set in Larch Hollow, a town 4 days' ride south. Clara didn't argue. She packed what she needed, left the dog with Thatcher, and mounted Ash without a backward glance. The road was familiar now, no longer full of shadows. She stopped in Bellstone on her way through, walked into the general store, bought nails, bread, thread, and tobacco. The clerk said nothing until she turned to leave. "Then you be careful, Miss Reed." She tipped her hat. Larch Hollow was bigger than Bellstone, busier, louder, full of eyes and wagons and words. Clara found the courthouse easily. It stood like a red spine in the center of town, tall and proud. Inside, the air was thick with heat and sweat and judgment. She was called to the stand on the second day. Harlan was there. He looked smaller, thinner. His eyes didn't hold the same fire, just bitterness. She took the oath, her hands steady. The judge asked her to speak. So she did. She told them everything, how he took her after her mother vanished, how he sold others, how he tried to sell her, how he came to take her back by force. She did not cry. She did not shout. She just told the truth. When she was done, the courtroom was silent. Then someone in the back clapped. One clap. Then another. The judge pounded his gavel, but it was too late. Clara Reed had said her piece. And the world had listened. Harlan was sentenced the next morning. 25 years. Clara didn't stay for the verdict. She was already riding home. The road back was quiet. At the ranch, Thatcher waited with stew on the stove and a new chair on the porch. "Thought you might need a place to sit and think," he said. She did. That evening they sat side by side, the sky burning itself into dusk. Jonah lay at her feet. The wind carried the scent of wheat and pine. "You did it," Thatcher said. Clara shook her head. "We did it." He looked at her. She stared ahead. "I want to write again." "You should." "I want to tell stories that don't end in pain." He nodded. "But I want to remember it too," she added. "Not forget, just carry it better." "You will," he said. The stars came out. Slow, bright, sure. She opened her journal. Wrote a new page. This time it said, Chapter 1, Clara Reed was never sold again. And beneath that, she was chosen and she stayed.